Hey everybody, it's the Sustainiacs. I am a Sustainiac. My Sustainiac with me today, or the other Sustainiac, is Salina Docherty, formerly known as Salina Toll, or commonly known as well, because you can find her under both names, really, right now. But she's awesome. I found her under both names and tracked her down, so you can do it too.
It's
She's
complicated, isn't it? What's so complicated?
it's not that complicated. Once you know who she is, you can find her. You can do it. I ran across you researching recycling initiatives, et cetera, throughout the Caribbean.
Yeah,
And but then I found you really quickly through Windward Commodities, right? And LinkedIn.
yeah.
And they're kind of linked. I mean, both your life is sustainable, so we're going to talk about that. How you got into sustainability. We're going to really talk about recycling when we get into it. But the Windward thing is going on right now, and it's a company. You're the co-founder or founder and
Correct.
CEO, right?
Correct. Co-founder. Yeah.
So give us the elevator pitch on Windward, and then we'll kind of back up and see how you got there and start talking about recycling and stuff.
So basically, at Windward, we work primarily in agricultural commodities, and we create value that we share more equitably with particularly smallholder farmers. Um, so whether it's environmental impact or social impact, which is what I was just referring to, um, we create supply chains within agriculture that are sustainable. And that requires a lot of time and patience and effort and investment and a long-term view, because the supply chains tend to be quite challenging and quite complex, but very important to food security, to livelihoods, uh, and to the environment. So it's worth the investment. And you end up working with very cool people and very experienced people. And yeah, it's very worthwhile when you get it right.
So
So
okay,
yeah,
now when people talk about supply chains, there's a lot of people who understand it, but there's the vast majority who don't.
okay.
There's more that are kind of like supply chain geek wannabes because of going through the pandemic. Obviously, supply chains and logistics came to the forefront as everybody found out that if nobody's shipping anything, you don't have anything, right?
Correct.
so so when you talk about supply chains in agriculture and sustainable supply chains, are you talking about it strictly from an environmental impact of sustainability of the supply chain, or the steady, sustainable, reliable supply chain of agriculture? Right, like right now we see Russia pulling out of the wheat deal, I believe, with Ukraine, and now Ukraine's trying to figure out how to get that wheat out. And obviously, there's a bunch of countries, particularly in Africa, that are going, "Where are we going to get our wheat?" Right?
Exactly. It makes it all very real, doesn't it, to a lot of
Yeah.
people? So I talk about supply chains, and actually, I often will talk about value chains, and that's even more or less understood and defined in many different ways by other people. But what we mean by it is right from the farmer and the field and the farmer, right through any processing activities, right through any branding, packaging, logistics, any distribution activities, right through to retail and into the final hands of consumer, if it's a consumer product, or through manufacturers,
Right.
if not, and then ultimately to consumers. So really end to end. But perhaps the easiest way is to give an example. So back in 2010, the first investment that Windward made was into the Barbados sugar industry, actually. So we have a long and very proud and very passionate history with the Caribbean. And having lived in the Caribbean, myself and my husband set up Windward. And there's a story to how I got to the Caribbean, but we can come back to that. But anyway, in 2010, I was in the Caribbean after having been there for a while, and could see the plight of the sugar industry in Barbados, sort of following where other sugar industries across the Caribbean have gone. Small islands, no economies of scale,
Right.
world price takers, bulk supply, but not a lot, taking prices that don't really cover the cost of production or don't cover the cost of production at all. So we set up
I
a
got
joint
you.
we set up a joint venture after some negotiations and work with the Barbados government to create a different model for Barbados, which moved over a number of years the industry away from selling bulk sugar at world price to creating a portfolio of good sugars, branded sugars, packaged sugars direct into retail. So into Massey and the Caribbean, for example, and other retailers, and
Yeah.
into the UK market, and more recently into the US market, but through retailers and commanding much more of a price premium, sharing that premium with the industry as well as the farmers. So
So
if you,
rather than
yeah,
so rather than just bulk going into like Acme sugar in the States, it's
yeah.
now Barbados sugar, which
Correct.
is
And there's that
huh?
national pride. Absolutely. So put
Yeah.
Barbados sugar on the map. And yeah, and people recognize it.
It's
And
like
it's,
Mount Gay rum instead of sending up, the non-distilled rum up into Florida, just make it Mount Gay rum. Or what is from Barbados? Is it Gosling? Is that
you've got
I forget.
Mount Gay and you've got, gosh, what's the other one? I'm drunk enough of it. Mount Gay. Oh my gosh. Now we
I
have
thought
to
it was
manage.
got, huh?
Gosling is from, I think, Gosling is Bermuda, I think, isn't it?
Oh yeah. That's right.
Um,
Yeah, Gosling's Bermuda. But anyways, yeah. So I remember the tankers of the uncut coming into port. Um, into the ports there, Riviera Beach, and it smelled amazing, but it was um, highly toxic at that level.
for sure.
Uncut rum is like pretty rough. Pretty
Yeah,
rough
no,
stuff.
indeed. Well, this is
But
the
I got it. So you're building that economy so that they're sustainable. I mean, because like St. Lucia went through that problem. I remember early in or late in the 90s, pretty late in the 90s, when the banana tariffs became an issue, right? And we
yeah,
killed the banana tariffs on the mainland bananas, and it
that's right.
really messed up like St. Lucia and probably a few other islands, right? I mean, their
Well,
economy was like they can't
exactly. And
compete
then
with
you're
the
trying to
mainland.
find an angle, whether it's sort of fair trade or organic or whatever, to build a premium for products that offset those kind of loss of tariffs and loss of support in the industry. And it's brutal. Um, so yeah, so that's what we've done with sugar, and then we've taken that model, working with some amazing partners like the Shell Foundation and Common Fund for Commodities, a UN organization who co-invested with us then in similar supply chains in other countries. So we went to Zimbabwe, for example, um, because actually Shell Foundation had some investments already there, and it made sense for us to also do lots of opportunities to make a difference there. And we invested in creating some chili sauces from smallholder chilies, climate smart chilies in Zim, along with a honey brand. So honey is an incredible incremental source of income for smallholder farmers alongside subsistence farming or cash crop farming. So setting up a reliable market for honey, and we then created, similar to the sugar example, a brand that we put on the shelf nationally, and created this national brand and this sort of constant market for honey from the smallholder farmers, and trained up farmers. So with all of this, there's capacity building as well. Same with the chilies. We work with an organization who built up knowledge of how to farm chilies in a climate smart way using sort of solar irrigation and evolving techniques to cope with climate change. So to your question earlier, is it social? Is it environmental? Done well, it's both. Because you need to
Yeah,
make sure
yeah.
that you're investing in all of those areas to create something that's sustainable for the next 2, 5, 10 years as we face these climate change and related challenges.
Yeah, it strikes me as you're talking through this too, because you painted that picture very well in leading up to that answer to the original question and saying it's both. You painted that very, very well. It led us right down the garden path, as it were. But it also proves to me, and does it prove to you, or does it prove the model that sustainability, when you're looking at it from a social aspect and from an environmental aspect, actually opens up more opportunities for economic growth and viability of businesses, right? I mean,
Totally.
it looks, you had all these issues. These people were not surviving in the current economic, hey, this is the way things are done. And you said, wait, let's look at it from a sustainability aspect and what can be tweaked. And lo and behold, you've built up some fairly good economics for people, raised their standard of living, brought some good products to the market, and also started producing them in an environmentally conscious way, right? So I
I,
mean, social economic, it actually makes money, right? I mean, it's not, you don't need a bunch of people pouring money and saying, well, we'll support the poor honey farmers because it's a good thing to do, even though they have no money, it makes no money. That's not the case, right?
I think it needs both. So you're right. And it builds that resilience that you need in the long term if you're planning for climate change and, the social transition that comes with it. But I think it does need patient capital up front because unlike sort of, monocultures and, large scale estate farming, there's a capacity, there's an organization, there's a commitment that's needed to support smallholder farmers because building scale and aggregating, whether it's honey or whether it's chilies or whatever commodity or crop it is, if you're going to support a brand that you're putting on shelf and do it in a meaningful, scalable way, you need a lot of organization on the ground. And that's where that investment really is critical. And that patient, what I think is patient capital, that there's working capital. So you need to be able to buy, obviously, the crops. You need to be able to aggregate them and process them. And then you start to drive those economies of scale. But it's not like you're buying just from one big estate farmer and they are planning and controlling and aggregating all of their own products. You're working obviously with a lot of different smallholders. So there's a much wider economic benefit from doing it, but it can be quite challenging and complicated. And often, you'll have cooperatives that form, but often smallholders, aren't business people to start with. They need help with building up that expertise. So how do they run themselves as a cooperative, as a business? How do they manage money? How do they plan? How do they buy inputs? How do they make sure that they're working collectively and working to the same end? It's complicated, and often you might find it done alongside a larger estate, so that you have the larger bulk, more guaranteed supply alongside smallholders, outgrower schemes. So you can kind of get both.
Gotcha.
So we also worked with a huge rice mill in Nigeria to try and increase the supply and demand, actually demand first, and then the supply of domestic rice in Nigeria. And the mill had a lot of its own paddy fields, but then started to work a lot with outgrowers. And there was a group on the ground who were helping them to do that. And we were building up that brand and that presence and selling into retailers to help them create that pull and start to aggregate and sell through into the market. And it was great rice, much better than the low-grade rice that they were bringing in illegally over the border with Benin, for example, which is where all the money's been being made, buying cheap rice from the Far East and then selling it really cheaply in the market. So again, building up domestic agriculture in an oil-based economy, great economic benefit. Reach out to smallholders, fantastic localized benefit and upskilling and longevity to the project. But a lot of commitment from everyone in the process.
Sounds like that can get a bit dangerous from time to time. No?
What, because of the illegal rice coming in?
Well, I mean, you're taking somebody's market share away, right? And people don't like that sometimes.
For sure, there's dynamics you have to be aware of. That's quite an extreme example, but yeah. But yes.
Yeah. You have to watch. So, okay. Wow. There's so much to unpack there. So where does it go? Does it ever stop? Is there more on your radar that you're looking to go after, or, and how does that work? So did you set these things up in Barbados and everything's running cool? So you just peace and love. See you later. I got to go fix the rice deal in Nigeria.
So nice, that would be a dream. No. So the business now, actually, we're working, we just secured over the last couple of years an investment from a brilliant company called Hadco, actually in the Caribbean, a Caribbean multinational, who are playing quite a role now in the sugar company locally. We sort of continue to support that still needs support. I mean, that's now 12 years later, but it's growing. So now we have a facility outside of the mill which is a much larger packing and processing facility. So we're processing icing sugar. It's evolving into, and quality standards that allow the company to sell direct into stores into the US and around the region, rather than having to have a packer, say, in the States. So it's always trying to create that value. It's an ongoing process and commitment, I think, when you're building something. But no, we still have investments and work with a number of the businesses that we've invested in. We've also done a lot of consulting with international development organizations and continue to do some of that. So one of the challenges I am really passionate in talking about, but won't go on about it, is sort of a lot of well-meaning international sort of donor programs, sort of 3 to 5 years coming in to change markets, often have a too shorter focus in terms of what they can achieve, particularly when connecting smallholders with markets. So the programs, if they're done well, set something up like the rice example, with the right partners and the right business case to grow and grow and grow, like we've done with sugar over sort of 10, 20 years, because that's how long in reality it takes to really embed a smallholder supply chain in a really meaningful, scalable way. So we continue with some investments, and we continue with some consulting as Windward, and working still in the investments that we made initially.
Yeah, needs that constant nurturing to make sure it keeps following and maturing. Really interesting. So, all right, we're going to get into some recycling and stuff like that. But how? And because you were big in what is it, Care Caribbean, right?
Right.
But let's. Have you always been like that? Have you always been environmentally conscious, or was there a turning point in your life? How did you wind up in where you're at?
So the first half of my career actually was spent in sort of international procurement and supply chain roles in companies like Ford Motor Company, Motorola, Cable and Wireless, so sort of fairly big blue chip organizations.
Yeah.
Which saw me spend a lot of time traveling and experiencing, not really in the nature of my job, although a little bit as a head of procurement, making sure, that your procurement policies are equitable and diverse and inclusive. So an amount of that, and certainly spending a lot of time internationally. So I spent quite a lot of time in South Africa. I spent time in China, in the US, all over. But the last role that I had was with Cable and Wireless, and that brought me to the Caribbean.
Okay.
So I was actually doing a business transformation role for them across the islands, and again was very aware of the inequalities, the vulnerabilities of small island developing states. It's where I sort of started to understand the sugar industry more, and also even then, and this was back sort of in 2010, very aware of waste and environmental impact of not disposing of waste properly, walking along beaches, seeing the plastic on the beaches, the classic shots that we still continue to see now, but very aware of it.
So let me ask you this. So in procurement, because I argue this, and I can find I think I know what your answer is, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. The principles of a circular supply chains, right? The principle of circularity of, like, say, plastics. Let's use plastics, since we're going to get into plastics and recycling and all that kind of stuff. But when recycling is really taking that end to end straight line, bring it out of the ground, manipulate it and manufacture, consume it, and then waste. That's linear. Now we're connecting from end to end, as you talked about in ag. Now there is no end. It just goes around in a circle, right? There's no end. You're connecting, how you're bending that in.
In an ideal world.
But in attempts to do that, do not the principles to get there and aren't they like the basic principles of efficient procurement and supply chain anyways? Reducing waste, reducing costs, improving efficiencies, all those are rooted in sound procurement and supply chain principles, yet they're also the case for circularity, right?
Totally. I totally agree. I think some of the practicalities of the material as it's used by consumers, and then the infrastructure and the effort then for companies and the accountability of companies to get that material back in one way, shape, or form into their supply chains is where things, in my view and experience, are broken. So it's where we see sort of, producer responsibility schemes coming in, where companies are actually accountable for the waste that's generated from the products that they create. And you see
And
massive.
should they not be? I mean, should they not be accountable for that?
Hey, I believe they totally should be, absolutely. But they haven't been up until now, and often they're not, right? We see in the Caribbean, there are efforts for companies, there's sort of talk of companies like, your big FMCG companies trying to come together and collect waste at the end of, at the end of the process when their bottles or whatever have been used by consumers, or their yogurt pots or whatever they are. But in my experience, not hard and not fast enough and not in a meaningful way. And I don't see them paying for that. I don't see the companies being held accountable for that. Now, that's coming with taxation in Europe and hopefully to the Caribbean region, which I guess we're going to talk about under care. But at the moment, I don't think there is enough accountability put on companies with the support of governments, because often, governments are running the solid waste authorities all over the region. How could that collaboration, how could the collection and bailing up and reuse, or, shipping and reuse of materials be made much more pressing an issue and done in a much more efficient way? Because as you say, in theory, it makes sense that material comes back into companies' supply chains. There should be efficiencies of doing that. But I think because the products travel such a distance, particularly when they're going to islands, how do you do that? And of course, you're not talking
Yeah,
about.
no, that's a good point.
Well, you're not
That's a
talking
really good
about the
point.
yogurt pot that was made in Florida coming back from Jamaica back to Florida in the same way. But there's got to be some kind of mass balance. There's got to be some accountability, right?
No, you're 100% right. I mean, I just the United States is in the top 3 of producing plastic waste, right? We import recycled plastics.
Yeah.
How ridiculous is that? We're
Yeah.
bringing in recycled plastics from Indonesia. Why?
Yeah.
Why are we doing that? I mean, it's ridiculous. And you make a really good point, because in the islands, it goes down, it never comes back.
No.
I mean, and where do you do it? And we all know a lot of those islands, you and I know all too well that a lot of those islands, their landfills are full.
Oh, it's all going to landfill, right? I mean,
Yeah.
not with some exceptions, but for some of the most beautiful islands in the Caribbean, there is no recycling. I don't think people are fully aware of that, right?
No, I don't think people understand that there is zero recycling in these islands.
Yeah.
And they're looking at, okay, in a very short period of time, they need to start burning it. And some of them already have waste to energy, which people say, oh, waste to energy, that's great. No, it's not. You're burning trash. That's what that is. That's a really nice way of saying we're burning our trash. That's all that is.
And the challenge for the islands, apart from, there's very limited infrastructure and investment for recycling in place, is that the volumes are low, right? So recycling becomes economical when you have some scale to it in terms of running a recycling facility. But there's nothing, and it's a massive frustration of mine, as you know, from the last time we spoke, that there's basic things that the islands could do, really basic practical things, like put in a basic.
Let's get into that. Let's get into all that stuff. Let's talk about, first, let's set it up. We're teasing everybody with this, and this is really important stuff, because OPT USA, we are, our one of our missions is to get to the islands and start cleaning some stuff up. And we're talking to some legislators there, and legislators and senators in the USVI to get that done. We've been talking for years. It takes forever, but the interest is there. The desire is there. I think we're going to get there. They certainly recognize the issues to get there, but talk about from Windward. So you were doing Windward before you got involved with Caribbean?
Totally. Yeah. So,
okay. So how did that evolve, and what is Care Caribbean?
Yeah. So I moved back to the region. I'd been back in the UK for a while, actually, after the birth of my first daughter, Lily, who was born in Barbados. Who's very proud of having Caribbean passport.
There you go.
Anyway, we moved back for a number of years, and then moved back again during COVID for mainly sugar-related reasons. And I was quite determined that this time going back, I would get involved in waste and really understand what was or was not happening. And then sort of looked at some of the projections for waste across the region, sort of like in 2025, something like 60 million tons of waste is going to be generated in the Caribbean. It's one of the highest waste per capita regions in the world because of the volume of tourists that come in, because of the amount of packaged products that are imported. It's a crazy amount of waste for the size of the islands. And of course, it depends on tourism, right? And it's prone to hurricanes. So there's a massive resilience issue as well. You know, you're hit by a hurricane. There's nowhere for this waste to go apart from into the rivers and into the sea, and blocking everything and polluting everything. So it's a pretty pressing issue for the region. And there's not a lot of meaningful action being taken. And of course, there are some really important exceptions. So I came back and felt really compelled to do something. So I sort of did some research, understood some of the waste dynamics, spoke to some of the recyclers that exist, and sort of quite quickly built a network of people who were doing things, and was introduced to Steve by Tropical Shipping, who are absolutely committed to backhauling waste out of the region if it can be organized to be collected on the islands. So they'll take waste
Well, sure.
out.
I mean, it's not there. Tropical shipping is ocean carriage, right? I mean, they're ocean. I worked there for tropical for a number of years. So
Right,
yeah,
okay, yeah, right. So if you can get yourselves organized on island, then Tropical will help you at pretty low rates take it off to a reputable recycler somewhere else. You don't have to initially set up big recycling centers that require volumes to be efficient.
right.
You can create this hub where you take material, you take PET or cardboard or glass or whatever it is, from hotels and businesses, and you can start to work with communities over time. But quite quickly, you can open up the tap of mixed recyclables and get them to a central location, either using an existing recycler and perhaps updating or upsizing their facility. But what you basically need is, as you know, Michael, although you have a very innovative solution for these islands, which I'm sure you would talk about, but is basically a sorting line. This was our approach. You need a simple sorting line, a significant or appropriately sized horizontal baler, so you can bale up the material by type in a very efficient way for shipping, and you can get the material off island. Technically, it's not a very complicated thing to do.
No, it's not.
But there's a level of education, obviously, that needs to go with it. Working with hotels, which we have started to do, in terms of how waste needs to be separated. Maybe even encouraging them to charge a very small amount to their guests if they need to explain what's going on and what that money will be used for. It's basically some administration and some storage and some movement of material, but and then so Care Caribbean, the company that Steve and myself formed. So Steve runs just to backtrack to Steve. So I met Steve he through Tropical as well. He runs a company called All Caribbean. And he's worked for many years. He's run his own recycling. He works with the port authorities and the marinas and with some of the recyclers on island. And he and I came together and said, let's try a much more holistic approach. Let's try that education platform. Let's try and track and trace so we can actually understand what material's being moved and where it's going to, so we can start to report on that. We can start to have perhaps some of the numbers come in from customs so we can see the volume of material that's also coming onto the islands. We can start to see what's coming in, what we're collecting, what's going out, where it's going to. This is not very complicated stuff. There are platforms that exist to do that, and start to just open up the tap. And there's a value in this material. So Care would take a payment for moving the material that is enough to cover our costs. And then we're working with some hotels that say, right, when we've sold the material, take that money and pump it back into doing more or paying for
Yeah.
community collections, or, this is not a high money making operation. Let's just try and move the material, make sure that everyone makes enough to make it worthwhile, and get the stuff going.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. That's yeah. Shouldn't be that hard, right? It seems easy.
I just made that sound really easy, but
Yeah.
the politics and the complexities in engaging on some of these islands, just like anywhere, I guess. The solid waste authorities, very territorial. The companies that you want to work with, I think everyone has a view that there's so much money to be made in waste, yet no one's really making any money in waste. So I'm not sure where that
No, they're
perception.
not. Yeah. They all agree that there's a problem. They all agree that but nobody will do anything. It seems like they do something to make it look like they're doing something.
It's very strange.
It's one of those situations. I mean, listen. United States is not all that much better. Okay, the United States has taken care of their waste by keeping it out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah,
Period. The end.
yeah,
And that's why we're so screwed up here right now and so far behind with our recycling and our circularity of plastics or cardboard or whatever it happens to be.
yeah.
It's very
Look, I
very
think that's a
little.
really good point. So I'm in the UK right now, and there's all kinds of issues here as well. So some local authorities will recycle certain things in certain ways, others won't. You're never entirely sure where the material's going. We've heard all the scandals of it going offshore. So this isn't me saying the Caribbean is the only. So
No,
I'm so passionate about the Caribbean and the people that I work with there. I've worked with some incredible people and some very passionate people and some,
yeah,
brilliant people. But the politics and the turf wars over waste leave me cold. And good people walk away from the opportunities or walk away from getting involved in this area because it just is so unnecessarily complicated. So it's a real shame.
it
And
is unnecessary.
yeah. So not, like you say, don't give up, keep going, keep chipping away, and keep trying to find the right way to do it with the right people in the right way.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And the one thing that we're trying to do is build this, like you said, we're trying to build this hub, and that's kind of what the issue is, right? If you can get, because the volumes, say on a small island like Nevis or St. Kitts or something like that, is not going to be enough to really entice anybody to pump a ton of money into it and fight that fight to make it happen, right? It's going to be almost completely altruistic in nature, the drive to make that happen. But
Yeah,
if you can get a conglomeration, a group of islands, a cohort, so to
yeah,
speak, then maybe now you've got enough. But then you've got, like you said, the politics between those islands. They've tried to have a Caribbean Union.
yeah.
It doesn't work.
So when we and I think that there's also challenges around development finance as well. So I probably won't name the names of the organizations, but we spoke to some incredible people again in a couple of development banks covering the region, because we, like you were just saying, came to them with, let's go across all 21 islands. Not, or we had 21 islands. Let's not do it all at once. Let's phase it, but
Right.
let's go, because the whole makes sense. Doing Kitts or Nevis or Dominica or whatever, Grenada by themselves, but there's not a risk. That's the risk, the appetite to take on that risk with the development banks was not there. So then you come back to,
Right.
right, we're not getting traction. And again, I'm just not sure what we did wasn't perfect. So this I'm just talking through the process, whether, whatever, however, but it was frustrating because we were like, the model isn't done yet. So how do we prove that it works? Because we can't prove it because it's a different
Right.
approach. However, there are pockets of activity, particularly like as we were talking about at a different time in Dominican Republic, where there's some pretty advanced companies there doing some great stuff in
Oh,
recycling.
I've moved plastics with companies from there. In fact, one of the principles of a company that is recycling there, I worked with at Tropical Shipping.
Right, right. So there's these amazing
Yeah.
pockets of expertise, right, doing this stuff,
Yeah.
and quite difficult to do it places.
Sure.
Similarly, there's some of that in Trinidad, a little bit in Trinidad, and there's Jamaica has, there's pockets in definitely in some of the larger islands.
Sure.
But the development finance, the appetite to do that was limited. So
Yeah.
then you come back to working on, okay, well, let's try and prove a pilot on a small island. So we looked, Dominica and Grenada. Let's try and take a couple and make sure that, that is tested well. And then the economies of scale don't really work, and it's challenging because you're at a level with politics. So you kind of need some capital that is prepared to work in a more risky way with you, but build up to it, build up to that goal of having a good cross section of the islands engaged in the business or in the process.
Or I mean, if you can get an island that has enough capital to be able to fund grants.
Yeah.
And what I'm getting at, you understand what I'm saying. So there are islands there that have recognized and recognize the need to improve the situation. Their livelihood is tourism, period.
Correct. Yes.
Right. And so they have to fix this situation. Excuse me. But one of those things, as things get more and more advanced, is through that marketing of a sustainability of that island is going to attract more and more people as we move forward. Yeah. I believe that we'll come to solutions, but boy, howdy, it's difficult at this time.
And I think grants can work, but grants, it depends who the receiver of the grant is and how it's, as you know, there also can be quite
absolutely.
It's a great way to get things started, but I think can be a false economy if it's not part of the bigger story and the bigger business plan. But yeah, everything helps.
Yes. The problem is with the grants, and I mean, you talked about some of the legislation or alluded to some of the legislation that will help improve things like through taxation, et cetera, right? The carbon tax going into the EU and so on and so forth. Yeah. EPR legislation, right? Yeah. Which the U.S. doesn't have a national one yet, but there's a few states that are starting to develop them and so on. But like you said, if the wrong people crafting those laws for the wrong reasons are going to make it even more difficult for people who have the correct solutions to get those done. And the grant money is being thrown into places that are kind of doing things, but it's a Band-Aid or it's really smoke and mirror type of stuff. I'm not going to name names, but I'm sure you've got a few in your mind. They just make them even more entrenched in what is going on and more difficult to uproot the system that is there, right? I feel like I'm talking like I'm a Rastafarian, like we got to overcome Babylon, right?
No, I think you're right. You're definitely right. And I think the other thing that has worked, so I've obviously spent a lot of time living in Barbados, the deposit return scheme there is a neat way to get bottles returned. But again, it's what happens to them when they're returned. So Barbados has a fairly advanced recycling there's a company, Bees Recycling, and also a joint venture with the government and Williams Industries in Barbados that
nice.
Certainly recycle a lot, but a lot of the material that comes from hotels and comes from residential properties still ends up in landfill because they don't have the equipment to sort that material if it's not sorted at source. It's the same problem.
Exactly. And that's what we're doing. We're going right to source is our solution, as you alluded to earlier. And this is not a commercial for that, but check out optusa.org.
Indeed.
OPT, because that's what we're doing. We're getting there to that. But so in your opinion, what do you do? I mean, are we banging our heads against the wall? Is there a different rock we should be looking for the blood under? What do you think is the solution? Do you have one, or you think, you know what, we just got to pray and keep on moving, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think finding the right support on the islands and ideally groups that have a presence on a number of islands. So as I was mentioning to you, we're starting to work with St. Lucia Hotel and Tourism Authority, and they have a reach across the Eastern Caribbean. So it's really early days, and again, there's a lot of there's a lot of people to get on board. But that's how we're tackling it at the moment and talking to some of the bigger hotels directly. My view is a bit like you were saying, we need some patient capital to come in that is independent,
Yeah.
look, ideally, that is independent, that comes and helps us invest in the recyclers that exist, the capacity that's there, where it's not set up with local companies. This isn't about coming in and dominating the waste management industry in the Caribbean. It's about building the capacity of what's there already, where you can have trusted partners on the island who know the contacts, who know the island, who know the people.
Well,
That's
see,
so valuable.
I agree with you 100% because there's two things that I think kill the effort right off the bat. One is if you come across like you're going to use militant tactics like a Greenpeace, right? That
Yeah.
drops you dead in your tracks, and it just kills your effort. You're not going to get anywhere, especially in the islands if you come across in that particular situation. The other one is being too disruptive, or like you said before, you're disruptive to the money that's being made there, or the power that is perceived
Yeah.
by this individual or that group or this family or that family. Just like when I was working at Tropical Shipping, it was built up by Rick Morrell, who owned the company. It actually started in the Bahamas as Birdsall Construction. But I mean, he had it right. If the U.S. sneezes, the islands catch the flu, and so it was all focused on supporting those islands, and it was not only employing everybody on those islands, but he also knew that by employing everybody on those islands, it ensured that the company was serving the needs of those islands, right?
Exactly.
So you can't come down and say, "Hey, I'm from the UK and my name's Salina, and I'm going to tell you how to do things." That doesn't
Absolutely.
work. Or I'm Mike Vincent. I'm from Tennessee. I'm going to come down here and show all you, yahoos how to recycle. That doesn't work. It's got to be a collaboration, and it's got to be an enabling of the systems that are there to become
Totally.
more efficient. Right? Do you agree with
Totally.
that?
So definitely, 100%. So, Stephen, my philosophy is, where are the gaps? So there's an education gap. So let's use some tech and spend some money on marketing and educating and supporting and convening. There's some capacity, there's some equipment that's missing on a lot of islands. So where can we
Yeah.
invest in that with partners that are doing work already or are keen to get into that space,
Yeah.
and set them up for success? And then, we know how to buy and trade and ship and sell material in a responsible way. So let us do that bit and then do that transparently and pump that money back into the islands and grow and grow and grow the impact and work
Yeah.
absolutely hand in hand with the skills and the experience and the knowledge and the communities and everything that exists there. But what can we do? I think that's where can we play where there are gaps at the moment? How can we help and how can that make a difference? And the more you can do that across more islands, the better price you can get for the material, the better everyone is at the end of it. And ultimately, I think a lot of islands that we've spoken to want to have a role in creating either sort of material or products or, more value add with the waste that's collected rather than just send it for recycling. I know Antigua, for example, are talking about making plastic chairs or plastic furniture in some way. But the scale at which we're doing it at the moment is so small that just doesn't make sense. So,
Yeah, they're not going to make a chair.
yeah, once
Give you a
exactly.
footstool.
But once you get scale, like that takes time. But once you do, maybe come together as a Caribbean unit, if that's even possible, and say, right, where can we play to our strengths? How can
Oh,
we keep some of this value in the region? But as you know, that could be a way off. And then getting them to agree which island does what, I don't know. That's another level of facilitation and diplomacy. But once you get the material moving, perhaps there are options. I don't know, but let's start with the basics and see if we can get that right. Work
yeah.
it.
Start with the basics. I mean, just creating a decent cash flow for an export of ocean-bound plastic material, I think is like you said, the first step. And then
Yeah,
as you prove out volumes and where certain types are coming from, then you can start looking at industry built right there. Keep the circularity on the islands because I mean
exactly.
that's the ultimate goal.
That's the ultimate
right?
goal. I think the other
It's-
thing. Oh,
yeah, I agree.
sorry. The other thing that Steve and I and as care are saying is, look, in normal world you would ship to get the most value for, you would ship the same color PET bales in one 40-foot container to the end market, but on an island you
Yeah,
never have, it'll take you 6 months to get that much PET in some cases. So what we say is,
sure.
we'll work with you, work with what you've got, bale it up by color and by type of plastic or type of material, but mix loads, get it moving, and we can take it to markets that will receive it in that way. And that's a little bit different to how it's done elsewhere, because the economics of it
Yeah.
are challenging. But we've been doing it for long enough to know how to do that well. So it's another
Well, that's excellent.
nuance. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. No,
that's really,
it sounds like it really sounds like, what you've done at Windward. The same principles and ideas apply to this, because you're
definitely.
really talking about, small farmers of plastic that need to be built into, right?
And making
Yeah.
sure that the communities that are involved in the farming of the material are direct
Yeah.
beneficiaries of the sale of the material and that value. And it's again
That's
about
correct.
creating as soon as you can and as close to source as you can, creating the value. And
Amen.
that's
Yeah.
challenging with shipping the waste off island or shipping the material off island. But that long term view of how do you do more locally is something to keep in mind. So yeah, we saw it as a natural extension, even though agriculture and trash are quite different. They still, recyclable material has a real value. Um,
Well, yeah. I mean, it is, and I had a very very smart professor talking about how, the linear economy, you can't, the circular economy doesn't work with the linear economy. And I said, well, it actually does, if you just consider that the landfills, or the post consumer or post industrial waste, that's your raw material, there's your mine, that's your field where you're harvesting, et cetera, right? That's your rare earth mine or your coal mine, whatever. Just, if you consider it that way, then what are you talking about?
yeah,
You figured out how to extract, cobalt from the ground. You can't figure out how to extract, polyethylene. I don't
yeah.
understand. It doesn't make any sense. I don't think you want to, is the issue.
Well, and the challenge, and then it's hard, but the challenge is sorting it and stopping it from going into the landfill. And that requires, in some sense, I guess, slightly more sophisticated lines, or a lot of people sorting a lot of material along lines with, household waste and nappies and dirty, dirty residues that are coming from, and that's not quite so appealing. But there are machines, again, if
No,
you the right investment in the right places, you can do that in a much more automated way. As you say, there's got to be the appetite to do it, right?
I believe you. I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
So, Selena, look, man, 49 minutes. Poof.
It's gone. That was so fast.
Just like that. And right before I pressed record, you were like, I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but this should be fun.
True, true. There you go. You're a master at this. Look, you made that easy.
I'm telling you, it is incredibly interesting stuff, and people are looking for to hear that there's an answer. One, right? I mean, every time that I read, oh, there's a new article on plastics news or recycling news or whatever it is, and I'm like, you know, all right, we found this, we found that, and so people want to hear what the answer is, but
Mm,
also they want to hear, and most of the people want to hear how they can conveniently get involved. Is
yeah.
there ways for people to get involved with you at Windward and Care Caribbean, and how do they get in touch with you to do that? And who should?
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely get in touch with us. I'm always happy to have conversations. Would love to hear from people in the solid waste industry. Really would be delighted to have proper conversations around how we can move forward in Caribbean, like you and I have been having. How can we do it? How can we do it collectively? Actually, Care is really up for partnering. We talked about a partnership with others, with Tropical, collectively. How do we get a group of us? How do we maybe even convene an organization of us that's actually very practical and not a talking shop, because I can't
Hmm.
do any more of that, across across the Caribbean region. So particularly in that area, I am very passionate, but I'm really happy to talk windwood or recyclables with anyone at any time.
And how do they
Obviously,
get in touch with you?
sure you would. Well, my
You're
email,
phoning them.
should I put it in the message? Can I write a message or something? Because it's a long-winded email address, but I can say it. Salina.Docherty@windwoodstrategic.com.
Yeah, there you go. That's perfect. I'll put it in the. It'll be in there, and I'll put it in the notes and all that other kind of stuff. And I'll print it right on the screen, right underneath you as you're talking. I'll have it printed.
Okay.
I have that ability.
Great. That'll look very good. That'll look great.
Salina, this was awesome. We got way more to talk about. I mean, there's so much more, and regular updates. Hopefully, that are going to be really, really good type of updates. Thank you so much for being on.
And I can't thank you enough for having me on. What a great chat. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I love it. We'll do it again. We'll do it again very, very soon. I promise you. So, anyways, hey everybody, this has been the Sustainiacs. Michael Vincent. Hey, reach me at michael@opt.earth. Yeah, it's just .earth. Don't put a .com after that. It won't work. There's actually a .earth. Michael@opt.earth. And it'll get to me. Tell me that I suck or I'm great or suggestions or how do I get in touch with Salina and make stuff happen or whatever. And we'll do it. Until next time, everybody, hey, peace and love. Hey.